The laughter echoed through the elegant restaurant like a celebration that everyone had been invited to, except one man. At a quiet corner table, Navy veteran Ethan Mercer sat alone, staring at the untouched meal in front of him. His broad shoulders carried years of discipline, sacrifice, and silent heartbreak, but tonight they seemed heavier than ever. Around him, people whispered, pointed, and laughed without knowing the battles he had already survived. They saw only a man eating alone. They never imagined that before the afternoon ended, one unexpected invitation from a billionaire would completely rewrite his future. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Forever. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. It had been 3 years since Ethan left the Navy. He had served his country with pride, but coming home had been harder than any mission he had faced overseas. His wife had passed away after a sudden illness while he was still deployed, leaving him to raise their 6-year-old daughter, Ava, alone. Every morning began before sunrise. Ethan packed school lunches, braided Ava's hair using skills he had learned from online videos, worked long hours repairing construction equipment, and somehow still managed to attend every school event. He never complained because his daughter was the reason he kept moving forward, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. That Saturday morning had started like any other. Bright sunshine filled the streets, families walked through parks, children chased bubbles across the sidewalks, and the city seemed alive with possibility. Ethan had just received a small bonus after finishing a difficult repair project ahead of schedule. It wasn't much, but to him it felt like a miracle. For the first time in months, he decided to treat himself and Ava to lunch at one of the nicest restaurants downtown while she was attending a nearby children's art workshop. He wanted to surprise her afterward with dessert. Inside the restaurant, polished windows reflected the blue sky, and fresh flowers decorated every table. Most guests wore expensive clothing, discussing business deals or weekend vacations. Ethan arrived wearing a neatly pressed olive green t-shirt and clean jeans. His clothes were simple, but his posture still reflected years of military discipline. Some diners glanced toward him before quickly looking away. Others quietly assumed he didn't belong. When the hostess explained that his daughter would join him later, she politely seated him near the window. Ethan smiled with gratitude. For a few peaceful minutes, he simply enjoyed watching the city outside while waiting for his meal. It had been a long time since he allowed himself to slow down. Across the room, another table attracted everyone's attention. Wealthy entrepreneur Julian Hawthorne, one of the country's youngest billionaires, had arrived for a private business lunch. Cameras occasionally followed him wherever he went, and today was no different. His reputation for business success was legendary, but very few people knew he had once grown up in foster care with almost nothing. As Julian reviewed documents, his eyes wandered across the dining room until they settled on Ethan. Something about the veteran sitting quietly by himself caught his attention. There was dignity in the way Ethan carried himself despite his obvious loneliness. Julian noticed the carefully folded drawing resting beside Ethan's plate. Curious, he watched Ethan gently unfold it for a moment before smiling softly. It was a colorful crayon picture of a father and daughter holding hands beneath a bright blue sky, signed simply, "Love, Ava." That small drawing reminded Julian of a letter he had once carried everywhere as a child. Suddenly, business no longer seemed important. Ignoring the surprised expressions of his colleagues, Julian stood up, picked up his own plate, and walked across the restaurant. Conversation slowly faded as people watched the billionaire approach the lonely veteran. Instead of choosing one of the empty luxury tables nearby, Julian politely asked if he could share Ethan's table. The restaurant became almost silent. Ethan looked confused at first, believing there had been some mistake. But Julian simply smiled warmly. Within moments, the two strangers were sharing lunch, not as a billionaire and a working father, but as two men carrying invisible scars. Hours passed as they exchanged stories about perseverance, sacrifice, and family. Ethan spoke about missing birthdays during deployment, losing his wife, and learning how to become both father and mother to Ava. Julian shared memories of sleeping in shelters, wondering if anyone would ever believe in him. Neither man sought sympathy. They simply listened. When Ava arrived after her art class, she ran straight into Ethan's arms. Julian noticed how Ethan's entire face transformed with happiness the moment he saw his daughter. It was the kind of love money could never purchase. Ava proudly handed her father another drawing. This one showed the three of them sitting together around a table beneath the words, "Kind people become family." Julian felt tears gathering in his eyes. Before leaving, Julian quietly asked Ethan about his future dreams. Ethan admitted that he hoped to someday open a repair shop that would hire struggling veterans, giving them stable work and renewed purpose. It was a dream he had nearly abandoned because every dollar he earned went toward raising Ava. Julian nodded thoughtfully without making any promises. 3 days later, Ethan received an unexpected phone call. Julian had personally invested enough money to help launch the repair business. But there was one condition. The company had to dedicate itself to hiring veterans rebuilding their civilian lives. Months later, the once empty warehouse had transformed into a thriving repair center filled with skilled workers who had once struggled to find employment. Every toolbox represented a second chance. Every repaired machine represented hope restored. The local community quickly embraced the business. Customers appreciated not only the quality of the work but also the mission behind it. Veterans who had nearly lost confidence found purpose again. Families became financially stable. Children saw their parents smiling more often. As for Ava, she loved spending weekends at the shop, handing out lemonade and proudly introducing everyone to her father. One sunny afternoon, the restaurant where everything had begun invited Ethan, Ava, Julian, and dozens of veteran employees back for a community appreciation luncheon. This time, no one sat alone. Every table was filled with laughter, gratitude, and friendships that had grown from one simple act of kindness. The people who had once quietly judged Ethan now stood to applaud him as he walked inside surrounded by those whose lives he had helped rebuild. He realized that the most important invitation he had ever received wasn't just to share a table. It was an invitation to believe that compassion still existed in the world. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Forever. Every act of support helps spread more stories that remind us kindness still changes lives. Special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness changes everything," if you believe one small act of compassion can transform someone's entire future. Sometimes the strongest heroes are not the ones standing in front of crowds but the ones quietly carrying heavy burdens while refusing to give up. And sometimes, the greatest miracle begins with something as simple as asking a lonely stranger, "May I join you?" On an ordinary sunny afternoon, one shared table became the beginning of countless new futures, proving that kindness costs nothing, but its rewards can last for generations.